Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with this week in cannabis news from July 25th to the 31st. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready. But today we're going to start with this timely tweet from Brady Cobb highlighting that while we've come a very long way, and I do still believe that SAFE has the best chance of passing by the end of this year than we've ever had, although I'm not holding my breath and I'm expecting the Dems to fail us again. And so while I'm planning for the worst, I am hoping to be pleasantly surprised. The reality is there's still a lot of opposition to decriminalizing cannabis at the federal level. So just wanted to show this as a prime example. So take notice, specifically Big Pharma and investment banks funding an organization who is opposing cannabis legalization. But keep in mind the distinction. Cannabis legalization, not incremental safe banking or anything like that. And so cannabis is disruptive and they are worried onward. And so regardless of how many positive headlines we see in the coming months about could the US decriminalize cannabis or could we see legalization at the federal level, us in the know understand that was never going to be the case, which is why I make the distinction between heavy opposition towards cannabis legalization, but not necessarily safe plus or some incremental reform in the way. So that's why I still remain optimistic, but again, plan for the worst. So just to highlight some responses, RS responded, they have very deep pockets though, and are in bed with Senator Schumer. I don't see how safe plus goes anywhere with that kind of opposition. But again, the distinction between cannabis legalization and safe plus. And again, the Dems could do something to help their voter base, and that would be passing Safe Plus. If they do nothing, it just makes it look even worse for them, and it's going to be a massive red wave. And then Brady responds, my humble opinion, they oppose legalization as they aren't ready positioned for it due to Schedule 1's impact on their ability to make direct investments into this sector. Safe fixes that, in my honest opinion. Then they can invest. Then the legalization event probably in the coming years, not anytime soon. And then so lastly, just to add to that, it seems to me that they are trying to stack the deck for Schedule 2, get investments lined up and press for federally regulated medical market. Squeeze what they can from medical before moving to adult use legalization. All along, use 280E to weaken established legal businesses. And so these are all interesting takes. Keep in mind it's still speculation. We don't necessarily know. But again, just wanted to make the distinction between who is opposing cannabis legalization and then actual safe banking or incremental progress. And obviously, we know Big Pharma has lobbied Schumer not to pass SAFE, and he's delayed thus far. Wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't pass it at all, but we do have to obviously plan accordingly for our own situations. But so just to touch on this list, wanted to share. So according to Peter Grinspoon, MD, according to Marijuana Moment, Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America is asking its supporters to urge senators to oppose newly filed federal cannabis legalization bill. And look at who funds CADCA. So this is a link with the screenshots below. A who's who of pharma and rehab. Can you imagine that? Rehab centers lobbying against legalizing cannabis because they know they're going to lose money if they end federal prohibition. It's unbelievable. And so this is just going to piss you off, but here's a list in case you're wondering who is bankrolling the anti-cannabis legalization movement. And there are so many partners, a lot of them drug companies, a lot of them big banks. But so here's a list. Our corporate partners supply in-kind and financial support to our Drug-Free Kids campaign, the National Leadership Forum. Incredible, right? 100,000 dead from opioid overdoses. If you had put a cannabis dispensary in a state without it, you see a 25% reduction in opioid overdoses. Nothing told about that. And so clearly this is not about public health, but about control. And so lastly, the remaining part of this list, we see Pfizer. The fact that Purdue Pharma can even lobby based on how many billions they've had to pay for causing the opioid epidemic is disgusting. Another pharmaceutical company. And so obviously big list in here, Johnson & Johnson, they don't want to, have cannabis companies take any of their market share. So it just infuriates you, reminds you of how far we've come and still how far we still have to fight. But this is again about federal legalization or legalization at the federal level. And this would still be descheduling. None of these companies also want cannabis descheduled because that makes cannabis illegal overnight, and that affects their ability to make money. And so that's why while we want descheduling, that's not likely what we're going to get outright, and they're going to do everything they can to weasel their way around actually doing what we want. And so on to this one from Todd Harrison, just to remind you that we have an earnings parade starting next week, especially with US MSOs. So we saw Tilray, and they were fairly disappointing. I don't know what SMG is, but starting next week we'll have Green Thumb, Grow Generation, Canopy Growth, Curaleaf, Merrimet, I believe, Kronos Group, Acreage, Leafly, Terra Ascend Holdings, Ascend Wellness Holdings, and then Air Wellness. And so there are other companies that have yet to announce their earnings date, but we can expect the rest of the MSOs to be coming in August as well. And so with that, wanted to share some news that we got. Marijuana Moment reports that a bipartisan DANK cannabis research bill filed in Congress. Really? They just passed a research bill out of the House. and it could pass the Senate. Like, they need to introduce another research bill. So let's see what this one entails. And so in any case, the measure would require the National Institute of Health to collaborate with other agencies, including the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, to develop a national cannabis research agenda that addresses key questions and gaps in evidence. Although I figure that they probably have not gone to pubmed.gov, searched cannabis, and found the 29,000 study results that they could possibly pick through. I'm sure there's a plenty amount of studies there that they could use as reference, but regardless, they can't seem to figure anything out on themselves and have to do everything bureaucratically. And so that agenda must include 6 primary research objectives. For example, the agencies must prioritize studies into the safety and efficacy of cannabis in the treatment of multiple conditions, such as epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, chemotherapy-related pain and nausea, as well as the use of cannabis as an opioid alternative. While other agenda items include research into the effects of cannabis on at-risk populations like children and pregnant women. There's really no evidence to support this, so they're just making these claims based on what they believe to be true. Just want to highlight that, just because we haven't done the research yet. If cannabis was descheduled, we could do that and find it out. But we know that the body has an endocannabinoid system which sort of locks in sync with THC, CBD, and other molecules. We don't necessarily know if it's actually bad for these for the bodies, but I can tell you it's a lot worse for children and pregnant women, locking up the man of their house because they have a plant in their pocket. So I'll go on. The non-therapeutic impacts of cannabis, the relationship between cannabis use and behavioral health, the clinically appropriate dosages and modes of delivery of cannabis, and other public safety considerations related to potency, youth access, and misuse. Well, we know that when you legalize in a state, youth access and youth use goes down. We know that impaired driving goes down. And potency, I think the only people that really care about potency are bureaucrats that try to write up cannabis policy. And so while it's infuriating, it seems like this sort of just expands the previous research bill that might have passed the House. And hopefully this could be another ingredient that gets added to a Safe Plus along the way. We don't know, but more cannabis bills is better than less. Well, we've got another one from Todd, so thanks, Todd, for sharing this one. As federal cannabis records would be expunged under new bipartisan congressional bill introduced by Reps Troy Carter and Ronnie Davis. And I do believe Troy Carter was behind the CLIMB Act as well, which is the bill that would allow U.S. MSOs to uplist onto major U.S. exchanges, are sponsoring the Marijuana Misdemeanor Expungement Act. So I'm not going to go through the whole article. You can grab the link below, but it seems like another ingredient that's being introduced that could be added to an eventual Safe Plus. And while the Dems have done nothing thus far, it would be wise for them to do something as opposed to nothing before they get kicked out and lose their power in November, which they no doubt will. And so while that's good news, got another study here highlighting the benefits of ending cannabis prohibition. So thanks, Todd, for sharing this one. The supply side effects of cannabis legalization seems fairly obvious, concluding that legalization of recreational cannabis has the potential to generate tax revenue to fund critical government projects and services, let alone jobs, let alone decreasing youth use, let alone decreasing impaired driving, let alone the reduction in opioid overdoses by 25% when you introduce a dispensary where one did not exist before. A lot of benefits. Obviously, it'd be great if we can get them all into one place, but another study highlighting positive benefits of ending cannabis prohibition because there are very few cons to it. And so with that, some snippets from investment firms. So thanks, Todd, for sharing this one. This is Jeffries on U.S. cannabis as of July 29th. Note, federal misdemeanor expungement bill introduced late Friday, which could help shape the plus for safe banking. And so that's sort of just touching on, could these be ingredients that get added to an eventual safe banking and an incremental reform before the midterms? We don't know. We are obviously planning for that to possibly happen. While we do still have to plan for that not to be the case, I'd rather be invested and in if that does happen and the flip does switch. But regardless, more information, U.S. legislation updates here, so you can pause to read what Jeffries has to say. While important development about 280E, possibly. And so you can pause to read that story, but I will touch a little bit more on that story later on as we move through. And so with that, another one from Jeffries previewing U.S. cannabis earnings, and this one also came from July 29th. Despite the expected muted first half of 2022 top line, we expect to see strong acceleration in the second half of 2022 as new states open, while strong double-digit sales and EBITDA growth continue to make U.S. cannabis a standout sector. And so just to give you a bit more info here, you can pause to read. Top line softness should persist in Q2, except for those MSOs with exposure to New Jersey, with margin normalization continuing, not helped by input costs, but then they expect second half delivery should be much improved, however, especially because of New Jersey and then hopefully other new states coming online. And so they do have second quarter 2022 estimates versus consensus down here for Cresco, Green Thumb, Air, Columbia Care, Trulieve, Curaleaf, and TerraSend. And so it might be difficult to read. You might have to grab the link below, but you can do that if you'd like. And so moving on, we've got this one from Dennis Rudolph. So thanks, Dennis, for sharing this one. Sales of cannabis versus alcohol. Interesting comparison and dynamics. And so this one, I believe, comes from Headset and Needham & Co. Retail sales of alcohol and cannabis. Highlighting that while the demand and popularity for alcohol is going down, at the same time, it seems the demand and popularity for cannabis is actually rising. So you can pause to look at this visual a bit longer. Well, we've got this one from Dennis Rudolph sharing this visual from Needham again. And while I've shared this one from Needham many times, it certainly applies more now than ever because at these current valuations, based on the growth these MSOs are going to see in the next 12 months, especially with New Jersey having just come online, but Connecticut and New York in the coming months, and then new states organically reforming their laws, obviously this does make them a very attractive outlier. North American industry valuations and growth, cannabis is a clear undervalued outlier as their industry sales compounded annual growth rate from 2021 to 2023 is one of the few close to the 50% ranges, while at the same time they're trading at 2022 enterprise value divided by EBITDA of below 10x EBITDA compared to other companies trading at 15x, 20x, 25x, and obviously the lower x, the more potential upside, especially looking at 50% growth year over year. And so that's impressive, and we'd love to see that. Well, we got this one from Todd Harrison sharing what AGP has to say on U.S. cannabis as well. And so second half of 2022 thought and preview along with second half of 2022 outlook. And so you can pause to read, but this sort of summarizes what we've seen in the last few weeks with Booker sort of changing his sentiment as New Jersey's looking to ramp up, and hopefully all this new random legislation that has been introduced in the last few weeks will act as potential ingredients to, again, a larger Safe Plus package omnibus that can be passed before the Dems are kicked out of power. And so with that, an update out of New Jersey as the CRC had their meeting on the 28th. So thank you, Christopher Norman, our favorite New Jersey source on the ground, for letting us know that the Verano, Neptune Dispensary, and Columbia Care's Vineland 2 for adult cultivation have been approved by the New Jersey CRC. So we love to see that. While the New Jersey CRC did not release Q2 cannabis sales information at its meeting, which we were anticipating, we thought that they might release the May, June, and July sales figures. Unfortunately, they didn't. Suppose it can be done by press release and will be out soon. We don't know if it will be out soon, hopefully, but thanks Chris Norman for at least adding a bit of context as to where those figures were because we were anticipating them. And so with that, on to some MSO news. Curaleaf celebrates opening of Tampa Citrus Park Dispensary. So this is the company's retail presence growing in Florida to 51 locations in the Sunshine State, while it makes for their 137th location nationwide. So you can pause to read for more information about this location and how it will help Curaleaf compete in this competitive state of Florida. Well, we've got Verano as well, also expanding in Florida, not trying to lose any steam there, as Verano accelerates Florida retail footprint expansion with the opening of Move Port Charlotte, the company's 53rd Florida location. So a bit more information if you wanted to pause to read, but this highlights Verano's active operations span 13 states, comprised of 107 dispensaries and 13 cultivation and processing facilities with more than 1 million square feet of cultivation capacity. So at the same time, though, not all great news for Verano, as apparently Verano will have to restate their previously issued financial statements. And so while this is not a good look for Verano, I don't necessarily know what it entails for the company, but I imagine it costs more time and more money that they don't want to have to spend on this. And so just a bit more information, as today, or at least on the 27th, it was announced as a result of internal compensation and tax reviews, certain accounting errors were uncovered, and it will be required to restate each of the previously issued financial statements set forth below. And I do believe that this is every statement that they've made since IPO. So yeah, not a good look for them. And plus, adding to that, all of which together with all related disclosures, previously furnished or filed reports, earnings releases, investor presentations, or similar communications should therefore no longer be relied upon as legit and should be seen as void. And so obviously that's just a lot of work that Verano has to do starting now, and a lot of backtracking that they don't want to have to do, but at the same time they're still opening up new locations. So it doesn't mean that they're just going to eventually go bankrupt tomorrow. And so there's more information on this below here if you wanted to pause to read what they actually have to go through, but I don't necessarily understand it that well, so I don't want to be the one to try and relay what this means. You can just pause to read if you're interested, or grab the link below. And so with that, though, at least good news is Verano is set to report their second quarter 2022 financial results on August 16th, 2022. And so hopefully they can get these Q2 earnings right. To show us that their operations are on the right track, and then they can go back and fix those old financial mistakes. But with that, also happy to share that Columbia Care is set to report their second quarter 2022 results on August 15th at 8 a.m. before the market opens as well. So we can look forward to Columbia Care's earnings also coming on August 15th as well. While lastly, Air Wellness expands Pennsylvania footprint with launch of Kind premium flower statewide and opening of 9th dispensary in Indiana County. And so Air Wellness, a leading vertically integrated MSO, announced the availability of its premium whole flower brand Kind statewide in Pennsylvania, while the company is also announcing the opening of Air Indiana, the company's 9th affiliated medical dispensary in the Commonwealth, on Saturday, July 30th. And so I imagine there's not too many MSOs competing in Indiana, so good on Air Wellness for getting in there early and trying to get up as much market share as they can. So a bit more information on here if you wanted to pause to read. But with that, on to some other stories. Just wanted to share this one from DNBC because this is about a story about a company called Harborside, a small MSO, but we're going to start with this news. Big news for U.S. cannabis with potentially very positive implications for legal operators. Now, the thing is, I don't necessarily understand how these implications work, and so I don't want to try to be the one explaining. I'm just going to be the messenger. But apparently, Statehouse, formerly known as Harborside, just had its legacy IRS 280E bill reduced from $22.1 million to $5.8 million, with payment schedule of only $50K per month for the next 16 months. And so I will put this news release down in the description if you wanted to read into it yourself and try to figure this out. Now, again, I don't understand why Harborside ended up getting that sort of good deal with a massive reduction in their 280E, and I'm not going to try and explain it, but just wanted to share DNBC's context to it. The press release doesn't dive into much detail as to why the taxman gave them a break, only that they did. So again, you can go look into it if you want. Not going to say that you're going to get the answers because clearly DNBC looked through it and he couldn't really find anything. But if we can understand why they reached an agreement, we'll know more as to how much it benefits the other MSOs. As if we're seeing one smaller MSO get a nice deal where their tax bill is reduced from 22.1 million to 5.8 million, we'd hope some other MSOs might get that deal. Anyone get more detail? Either way, it is a rare bit of good news, and so I just wanted to share it because while it doesn't apply to the Tier 1 MSOs or some of the other ones I talk about, this could be beneficial for the other MSOs down the line if there's some sort of ruling similar for the other ones, much like this one. And so just to touch on some answers down here, Joe Greisler responded, IRS deals are usually made under duress. Tier 3s and 4s are forming a line, worth a shot for Tier 1s and 2s. What was the name change about? Anything to do with shedding financial burden or financial engineering? No idea, not one I own, just found the tax break interesting. And so it sounds like they were unable to pay from what I hear. And so obviously if the government wants to be nice, they can also say, okay, we're not going to force you to go to bankruptcy. We're going to reduce it a little bit. Unlikely the companies can pay. We'll get some treatment. We'll see. Could well be that's the case. But so again, just wanted to share this because this did happen this week. Don't know if it means anything for other MSOs, but it's possible that the IRS is just being kind to these smaller MSOs and giving them a break, which obviously is beneficial for them in the long run and obviously all the people that they employ. And so I think that's a good win for us as well. So some more state news though, this one from Beacon on Ohio cannabis. So thanks Todd for sharing this one. Marijuana industry update from Beacon on Ohio. As Ohio sales up 8% quarter over quarter in Q2. So for more information on the Ohio breakdown, you can pause to read here. Well, we've got this one from MJ Biz Daily highlighting that Michigan's wholesale cannabis flower prices have plummeted to a new bottom. And while this sounds unfortunate, I think it's interesting that this comes about a week after Colorado, the most mature market in the country, also came out saying that their wholesale prices have reached a second bottom for the Colorado market. And why I find that interesting is because when Colorado hit its first bottom in about 2018 and 2019, that bottom then went up to a new peak in January and February of 2021 when MSOs were at their highest valuations ever before coming all the way back down now to a bottom, which they reported last week. So interestingly enough, Michigan has bottomed for the first time. Now, do we think that they're only ever going to go down? Or could it be the case that Michigan bottoms and then goes up to a new high when MSOs in the cannabis industry, the U.S. cannabis industry, is valued at the highest valuations that we've ever seen? Then Michigan will go back to a new high before coming down to a second low, much like Colorado. I don't know. Just thinking out loud, but let me know what you think in the comments. And so we're going to get into the story, though, as prices of wholesale recreational cannabis in Michigan are now as low or lower than those in older adult use states, underscoring how new markets are ramping up more quickly and in some cases becoming glutted. But that's the beauty of the laboratories of democracy that are the United States, right? So we get to see how all these different scenarios play out. And of course, the states that reform their laws last get to see which states did it best, and then they get to copy that if they want. But as industry insiders say, cannabis flower in Michigan is readily available for less than $1,000 a pound in the wholesale market, and often for much less because of oversaturation as more and more cultivation companies come online in the state with no limit on business licenses. But who do you think this hurts the most? Big MSOs that have massive cultivation at scale, or small business owners and mom-pop entrepreneurs or minority entrepreneurs? Obviously the smaller ones, right? And so just a bit of context now, the same grower is lucky to get $600 a pound, and she's heard of some selling for as low as $300 a pound. And so they say in particular, as more multi-state operators learn how to quickly set up shop in new regions with many producers, again, the larger MSOs that are good at this, the pace of newly legalized states markets hitting an oversaturation point is speeding up. And so again, interesting to note that Michigan did hit a bottom a lot quicker than we saw out of other states like Oregon and Colorado. And so Michigan began cannabis sales at the end of 2019, and the wholesale market prices now more closely resemble those in older markets such as Colorado and Oregon, where wholesale prices have been falling for a year or more. After reaching new all-time highs at the beginning of 2021. I have to add that for context since they leave that out, but that's when the entire industry was a lot more fairly valued than it is now. And so while Colorado's adult use sales launched in Jan 2014 and Oregon's launched October 2015, both markets took longer than Michigan's to experience product saturation and falling prices. And so I don't think Michigan is doomed based on, what we've seen in the past and how this industry does follow cycles. Hopefully the stage is set for the next 12 to 18 months to be a boom for this industry, as obviously the last 12 to 18 months have been a complete failure since the Dems have failed to keep any of their campaign promises, making the lives of small business owners and minority entrepreneurs in Michigan, especially now, a lot harder since prices are plummeting. And so what are they left to do? Try to survive, as cannabis companies across Michigan are tightening their belts, relying on vertical integration and trying to build brand recognition to be more competitive. Best believe it's a lot easier for the large MSOs with a lot of cash to grow at scale, eat up that market share, and build that brand recognition, while unfortunately the minority entrepreneurs and small business owners are left holding fulfilling the empty promises of Democratic politicians. Well, we got this one, so thanks, Todd, for sharing out of Connecticut, as their Cannabis Social Equity Council approves 5 retail dispensaries. So love to see Connecticut slowly but surely getting the ball rolling as they plan to officially launch the entire program later this year, as a state panel approved 5 retail dispensaries as part of Connecticut's social equity initiative to benefit Black and underrepresented communities. So more information on the link below if you wanted to grab that. But hey, 5 retail dispensaries, it's a slow start, but good to see them, again, getting that ball rolling. Well, some news out of Arkansas, so thanks, Tom, for sharing this big, as apparently Arkansas Secretary of State verified activists got more than enough signatures to put a cannabis legalization initiative on the November ballot. So good job, Arkansas activists, as the measures reform still needs to be approved by the Board of Election Commissioners next week, though. So wouldn't be surprised if we get this story and then something shady out of the Board of Elections Commissioners comes out and they say, oh, for some reason you didn't get enough, and then Arkansas has to go back to it and get more signatures. We've seen that in the past. Hopefully that's not the case. Would be great news if Arkansas does in fact have the enough votes to get on the ballot, and so we'll have to wait and see if that's the case. But also just wanted to share good news, as we saw a story that apparently Missouri might not get the votes. Todd does share this new one out of St. Louis today. Effort to put legal pot question before Missouri voters does go down to the wire. So it's saying that the fight is not over. I can't say without any certainty whether it will make it or not. It is in no way certain that they will fail. This isn't dead. So essentially, you didn't even need to print a story, and you can just tell us the results once the results are out. So again, just relaying the news. Don't shoot the messenger, but I will obviously let you know once we do get the final say on Arkansas and Missouri as they fight to get that on the ballot. Well, lastly, this one from Jungle Java wanted to share this Forbes article, as Switzerland fully legalizes medical cannabis and allows export via Forbes. As from August 1st, patients can get medical cannabis through a medical prescription. So great job, Switzerland, for making medical cannabis available and accessible to citizens in your country that need it. And while we're hopeful for many more EU states to hopefully legalize for medical over the years, eyes are on Germany, as from now until the end of the year, they are writing adult use recreational legalization that they hope to have done by the end of the year, that they can hopefully pass and make law in early 2023. And that would be huge, because Germany would be a massive first domino to fall in EU for adult use rec. But at the same time, from now until then, if the US could take initiative and do the right thing, man, that would set the stage for a massive global cannabis boom. And a man can wish, can he? That is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you got some value out of it. What do you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great week, everybody.